The day I realized my husband had a second life, it wasn't because of a message or lipstick on a collar or even a lie that didn't quite add up. It was because a girl young enough to be my daughter threw iced coffee all over me in the middle of my own hospital and then told me her husband was the CEO. I remember the way the cold liquid hit my skin. It soaked through my white suit, clinging, dripping, turning something my father had given me into a stained, ruined memory. But that wasn't what made my hands go still. It was the way she looked at me after. Smiling, certain, untouchable. And for a second, I wondered if she was right, if I had already lost everything without even knowing it. My name is Victoria Reynolds. I am 35 years old, and to the outside world, I am the woman who inherited an empire. My father built Apex Medical Group from the ground up, and when he passed, I became the majority shareholder, holding 60% of everything he left behind. On paper, that made me the most powerful person in the building. But power, I learned, doesn't always look the way people think it does. By the time the story begins, I had already spent years stepping back, letting my husband, Daniel Reynolds, sit in the CEO chair. He was 38, charming, well-spoken, the kind of man who could walk into a room full of investors and have them eating out of his hand within minutes. People trusted him. They liked him. They believed in him. And because I loved him, I made sure he never failed. I handled the negotiations he couldn't understand. I reviewed the contracts he didn't bother to read. I stood behind him in board meetings, feeding him answers, guiding him through decisions, smoothing over the cracks before anyone else could see them. Officially, I was the chief strategy officer. Unofficially, I was the one holding the entire structure together. I told myself that was what marriage meant, supporting each other, filling in where the other person was weak. What I didn't realize was that while I was busy protecting him, he was busy building a life I knew nothing about. The morning everything started to unravel, I had just landed back in New York after a month in Germany, 12 hours in the air, cramped legs, stale coffee, the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones. I remember stepping out of JFK, the heat hitting my face, thick and familiar, and thinking, finally, I'm home. But something in my chest didn't feel settled. Maybe it was the silence. Daniel hadn't come to pick me up. He said he had meetings, important ones, with investors and department heads. That wasn't unusual. He was always busy when it mattered most. Still, I didn't go home. Instead, I told the driver to take me straight to Apex University Hospital. I didn't use the private executive entrance. I didn't call ahead. I didn't announce myself. I walked in through the main lobby like any other visitor, pulling my suitcase behind me, the wheels clicking softly against the polished floor. I wanted to see the truth, not the version presented in reports or filtered through Daniel's careful words, the real thing. The way the hospital breathed when no one thought I was watching. The lobby was exactly what it should have been, busy, alive, a little chaotic. Families sitting close together, whispering, waiting, nurses moving quickly, focused, efficient. The faint smell of antiseptic in the air. It should have reassured me. And for a moment, it did. Then I saw Ethan. Dr. Ethan Parker was on his knees in the middle of the lobby, performing CPR on a man who had collapsed. His movements were steady, practiced, completely absorbed in saving a life. Sweat ran down his face, his voice calm but firm as he called for supplies. He didn't look up. He didn't hesitate. He just did his job. I stood there, watching him, and felt something tighten in my chest. That was what my father had built. That kind of dedication, that kind of purpose. And then, just a few feet away, I heard her voice. Sharp, loud, entitled. Complaining about a car being parked in the sun like it was the greatest injustice in the world. I turned my head, And that was the moment everything began to fall apart. She was standing near the revolving doors, one hand planted on her hip, the other gripping a phone held high at just the right angle to catch the light. The dress hit me first. Bright pink, tight enough to look painted on, completely out of place in a hospital lobby where people came in scared, hurting, hoping for answers. Her makeup was heavy, her lips too red, her expression twisted with irritation as she glared at the valet standing in front of her. "I told you to park it in the shade," she snapped, her voice cutting through the room like glass. "Do you even know what heat does to leather? That bag cost more than your monthly salary." The valet, Henry, must have been in his 70s. I recognized him instantly. He had worked for my father for decades, back when Apex was still just one building and a handful of staff. His hair had gone completely white, his shoulders slightly stooped, but his uniform was still pressed, his shoes still polished. He held his hands together in front of him, nodding quickly, trying to calm her down. "I'm sorry, miss. It's been busy this morning. I'll move it right away." She rolled her eyes so dramatically it almost looked painful. "You should have already done it. Honestly, how do people like you even get hired here? This place is supposed to be high-end." I felt my jaw tighten. Behind her, the automatic doors kept spinning, letting in waves of heat and noise from the street. People were watching now. Not openly, not at first, but in that quiet, sideways way people do when they don't want to get involved but can't look away either. And then, just like that, her entire demeanor changed. She turned the camera toward herself, her face softening into a wide, practiced smile. "Good morning, guys," she cooed, her voice suddenly sweet, almost sugary. "Your girl Emily is dealing with some seriously incompetent service today, but we're staying positive, right? Drop some hearts if you think I deserve better." It was so fast, the switch, it made my stomach turn. 1 second she was humiliating an old man. The next she was performing for strangers on the internet like none of it mattered. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was just after 9 in the morning. Her badge, clipped carelessly to the neckline of her dress, read, "Emily Carter, intern. Late, out of uniform, causing a scene, streaming it live." I could feel something rising in my chest, slow and steady, like a pressure building behind a wall. For a moment, I considered walking away, going upstairs, dealing with it quietly, professionally, the way I always had. Let HR handle it. Let policies take their course. But then I saw Henry's face, the way he kept nodding, apologizing for something that wasn't his fault, the way his hands trembled just slightly like he was trying not to make things worse. And I couldn't do it. I stepped forward before I even realized I had made the decision. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm, controlled, the way my father had taught me to speak when things mattered. She didn't turn right away. She finished her sentence, smiled into the camera, then lowered the phone slowly, irritation flashing across her face as she looked me up and down. "What?" she said. Up close, she looked even younger, early 20s maybe, skin too smooth, eyes too sharp. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from experience, but from believing you're untouchable. "This is a hospital," I said. "People come here for care, not to be shouted at or used as background for a live stream. And he deserves to be treated with respect." I nodded toward Henry. Her eyes followed my gesture, then flicked back to me, unimpressed. "Are you serious right now?" she said, letting out a short laugh. "I'm talking to my employee. This doesn't concern you. I think it does when you're creating a disturbance in a public space," I replied. "And you're late. Your shift started at 8. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her posture shifting, like she was deciding whether I was worth the effort. "And who exactly are you?" she asked, tilting her head. Some bored relative with too much time on her hands? A few people nearby had stopped pretending not to watch. I could feel their attention, the weight of it pressing in from all sides. "I'm someone asking you to follow the rules," I said. Put the phone away, apologize, and do your job." For a second, there was silence. Then she smiled. Not the sweet, camera-ready smile from before. This one was different, smaller, sharper. "Oh," she said softly, "you're one of those." She lifted her phone again, angling it so it caught both of us in the frame. "Guys," she said brightly, her voice rising again for her audience, "look at this. I'm getting lectured by some random woman who clearly has nothing better to do." The camera came closer, too close, invading my space. "Say hi," she added, grinning. "Go on, tell everyone how important you think you are." And in that moment, standing there in the middle of my father's hospital, being reduced to a punchline in someone else's performance, I realized something had already gone terribly wrong. I just didn't know how far it had gone yet. The phone was inches from my face, the lens catching every detail I hadn't had time to fix after a long flight. The faint shadows under my eyes, the crease in my suit where I had been sitting for hours, the coffee stain waiting to happen, though I didn't know it yet. I could hear the soft chime of hearts and comments flooding her screen, little digital affirmations feeding whatever this performance was. "Go ahead," she said, her voice light, almost playful. "Tell them why you're so upset." I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her. "Put the phone down," I said quietly. Something in my tone shifted the air. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough that a few people nearby stopped pretending they weren't watching. Even Henry straightened slightly, like he had felt it too. Emily blinked once, then laughed. "Or what?" she said. "You're going to report me?" "Please. Do you know how many complaints get filed in this place every day?" She angled the camera again, making sure it caught my face clearly. "This is what I deal with, guys. Bitter people who think they can control everything. Probably hasn't been happy in years, so now she's taking it out on me." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not agreement, not exactly, but uncertainty. That dangerous gray area where people start to doubt what they're seeing. I felt it. That shift. That moment where truth starts to bend. "Last warning," I said, still calm. "Turn it off." Her smile widened. "Make me." And then she moved. It happened fast, almost too fast to register in real time. She stepped sideways, her shoulder brushing against mine, the large plastic cup in her hand tilting at just the right angle. The lid popped slightly and the entire contents of her iced coffee poured forward, cold, sticky, sudden. It soaked into my jacket, ran down the front of my blouse, splashed against my trousers, dripping onto the polished marble floor in dark, spreading stains. For a second, everything went completely silent. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant beep of a monitor somewhere down the hall, the soft, shocked intake of breath from someone behind me. The liquid clung to my skin, cold enough to make me shiver. I looked down. At the fabric, at the way it darkened, ruined in seconds. This suit had been a gift from my father, his last birthday before he got sick. I remembered him handing it to me, smiling, telling me I needed something strong enough to walk into any room and own it. And now it was soaked in cheap coffee, dripping onto the floor because of a girl who thought this was a game. Before I could even lift my head, she screamed. "Oh my God," she cried, her voice breaking into a high, trembling pitch that echoed through the lobby. "What is wrong with you?" I looked up. She had already stepped back, her free hand pressed dramatically to her chest, her eyes wide, shining with tears that hadn't been there a second ago. "You just shoved me," she said, her voice shaking. "You made me spill my drink all over you. Are you insane?" The crowd shifted again. Phones came out, not one or two, several. People who hadn't seen the moment, who had only heard the noise, who were now looking at me through the lens of her story instead of the truth. "I didn't touch you," I said. But it didn't matter. She was already turning back to her camera, angling it so it caught the stain on my clothes, the expression on my face, the perfect visual she needed. "Guys, you saw that, right?" she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "She literally attacked me. I'm just trying to do my job and she goes crazy." Henry stepped forward, his voice unsteady. "Miss, that's not what happened." "You! Stay out of it!" she snapped, her tone dropping for just a second, sharp and cold before she switched it back on for the camera. "You didn't see anything. I could feel it now. The shift wasn't just in the crowd, it was inside me. Not anger, something colder, something clearer." I reached into my bag slowly, deliberately, pulling out a handkerchief and wiping the coffee from my hands. The fabric came away sticky, dark, ruined just like the suit. Then I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the confidence in her posture, the certainty in her eyes, the way she stood there like she had already won. "You should apologize," she said, lowering her voice just enough that only I could hear. "Right now. Pay for my dress. Say you're sorry, and I might not make this worse for you." She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "Because if you don't," she whispered, "you're going to regret it." I held her gaze. "Why?" I asked. She smiled, and that was when she said it. "Because my husband is Daniel Reynolds," she said softly, "the CEO of this hospital." For the first time since the coffee hit my skin, I felt something crack. Not on the outside, inside. Quiet, precise, irreversible. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. The words didn't make sense. They didn't fit into any version of reality I had been living in for the past 10 years. My husband's name, spoken so casually, so confidently by a girl who couldn't have been older than 23. But she didn't hesitate. She didn't second-guess herself. She watched my face carefully, waiting for the reaction she expected. Fear, recognition, submission. "Daniel Reynolds," she repeated, a little louder this time, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. "That name ring a bell now?" Something shifted in my chest. It wasn't shock the way people imagine it, loud and overwhelming. It was quieter than that. Colder, like a door closing somewhere deep inside me. Around us, the lobby had gone still again. People were listening now, openly, phones still raised, capturing everything. A few whispers drifted through the air, the word CEO passing from one person to another like a ripple. Emily straightened, lifting her chin slightly, leaning into the moment. "So here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice dropping into something lower, more controlled. "You're going to apologize to me. You're going to pay for my dress, and then you're going to leave before I call security and have you escorted out." I looked at her. Really looked this time. At the certainty in her eyes. At the way she stood there like she owned the building. Like the rules didn't apply to her because she had someone powerful behind her. Behind her. My husband. The man I had trusted. The man I had built my life around. The man I had defended in rooms full of people who doubted him. A strange, hollow feeling spread through me. I thought about the late nights he claimed were meetings, the calls he took in the hallway, his voice lowered just enough that I couldn't hear the details. The way he had stopped looking at me the same way months ago, like something had already shifted, and I had been too busy to notice. I thought about the hospital, about the systems I had put in place, the standards, the people who relied on this place to function with integrity. And then I looked back at her. "You said your husband is Daniel Reynolds," I said, my voice steady, almost conversational. Her smile widened. "That's right. And he's the CEO of this hospital." "Exactly." She folded her arms, clearly pleased with herself. "So I suggest you start acting like you understand that." I nodded once, slowly. Inside, something was rearranging itself, pieces falling into place, not the way I would have chosen, but in a way that suddenly made everything make sense. The distance, the carelessness, The way things had started slipping when I wasn't there to hold them together. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about control, about what happens when someone is handed power they didn't earn and start believing they're untouchable. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" "Ethan." Dr. Ethan Parker stepped between us, his presence immediate, grounding. He still wore his scrubs, faintly damp with sweat, the sharp scent of antiseptic clinging to him. His eyes moved quickly from me to the coffee stain on my suit, then to Emily. Something dark flickered in his expression. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone calm but edged with something firm. "Why are you causing a disturbance in the main lobby?" Emily hesitated for half a second, just enough to register the shift, then recovered, tossing her hair back slightly. "Dr. Parker, perfect timing," she said, her voice snapping back into that performative sweetness. "This woman just shoved me and made me spill my drink all over her, and now she's harassing me while I'm trying to work." Ethan didn't even glance at her phone. He looked at me. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I held his gaze for a moment. There was something steady there, something real. It made the contrast sharper. "I'm fine," I said. His jaw tightened slightly, then he turned back to Emily. "You need to turn off the phone," he said. "Right now." Her smile dropped. "Excuse me?" "This is a hospital," he continued, his voice still calm but no longer soft. "You're out of uniform. You're late. You're disrupting operations, and you're filming people without consent. That violates multiple policies." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Policies? You're really going to lecture me about policies?" "Yes," he said simply. She took a step closer to him, her expression hardening. "You might want to rethink that," she said, "because my husband runs this place." Ethan's eyes didn't change. "Then your husband should be very interested in hearing about this," he replied. For a brief second, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty. But it was gone just as quickly. "Go ahead," she said. "Call him." I reached into my bag before Ethan could respond. "No," I said quietly. "I'll do it." My fingers closed around my phone. I glanced at the screen. The time read 10:15 in the morning. According to the schedule my assistant had sent me, Daniel was in a meeting upstairs. Important people, investors, officials. He hated being interrupted during moments like that. Good. I tapped his name. It rang longer than usual, and when he finally answered, his voice was low, hurried, trying to sound calm. "Victoria, I'm in the middle of something. Is everything okay?" I pressed the speaker button. "No," I said, my voice cutting clean through the silence around us. "It's not." The lobby went still again. "You need to come down to the main lobby," I continued, "right now." A pause. "Hey, what?" "Victoria, I told you. I'm in a meeting. I don't care," I said. My composure didn't crack, but something else did. "Come down here and meet your wife," I said, because she just threw coffee on me. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete I could hear the faint echo of his breathing, not the steady, controlled rhythm he used in boardrooms. This was different, uneven, shallow. "What did you just say?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper now, stripped of its usual polish. I didn't repeat myself. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "If you're not standing in this lobby in 5 minutes, I'll have my attorney bring everything upstairs and we can finish this conversation in front of your investors instead." I ended the call before he could respond. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the lobby felt thick, heavy, like something was about to break. I slipped my phone back into my bag and lifted my eyes to Emily. Her expression had changed. Not completely. Not yet. But there was something new there. A flicker. A crack in the confidence she had been wearing like armor. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice quieter now, the edge of uncertainty creeping in despite her effort to hide it. I tilted my head slightly. "Why did you stop your live stream?" I asked. She glanced down at her phone, then back at me, her grip tightening around it. "Keep recording," I said. "You wanted an audience. Let's give them the full story." A murmur moved through the crowd, low and restless. People shifted, repositioning themselves, angling their phones for a better view. Whatever this was, it had become something more than a simple argument. Ethan stepped closer to me, just enough that his presence formed a quiet barrier between me and the rest of the room. "Are you sure you want to do this here?" he asked under his breath. I didn't look at him. "Yes." He studied me for a second, then nodded once. "I'm right here." That was all he said, but it was enough. Across from us, Emily tried to recover. She straightened, lifting her chin again, forcing a small laugh that didn't quite land the way she wanted it to. "You're really putting on a show, aren't you?" she said. "You think calling him down here is going to scare me?" I didn't answer. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand how this works," she whispered. "Even if you are someone important, it doesn't matter. Men like Daniel, they get bored. They want something new, something better." Her smile returned, but it was thinner now. "And right now," she added, "that's me." I let her words settle. I thought about the years I had spent building something real, the nights I had stayed up reviewing numbers, fixing problems no one else even saw, the trust I had placed in a man who was supposed to stand beside me, not behind me, not beneath me, but with me, and how easily he had traded that for this. I exhaled slowly. "Is that what he told you?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she shrugged. "He didn't have to. I can see it." I almost smiled. Almost. Before I could respond, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened with a sharp chime. Every head turned. Daniel came out fast. Too fast. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly off-center, his hair no longer perfectly in place. He looked like a man who had left something important unfinished and knew it. His eyes scanned the room, frantic for a moment, until they landed on us. On me, and then on her. He stopped. Not completely, but enough that the shift was visible, like his body had run into something his mind hadn't been ready for. Emily saw him and lit up instantly. "Daniel!" she called, her voice rising with relief, with triumph. "Finally! Thank God you're here." She moved toward him quickly, closing the distance, slipping her hand around his arm like it belonged there. "They've been harassing me," she said, her tone snapping back into that familiar, wounded sweetness. "This woman shoved me, ruined my dress, and now they're trying to make it look like it's my fault. You need to do something." Daniel didn't look at her. He was staring at me. I stood there, coffee-stained, still, waiting. "Daniel," she pressed, tightening her grip on his arm. "Say something. Everyone's watching." He swallowed. I could see it in the way his throat moved, the way his chest rose just a little too quickly. "Who is she?" Emily demanded, her voice sharpening when he didn't respond the way she expected. That was when he finally looked down at her, and the expression in his eyes had changed. Gone was the warmth, the charm, the easy confidence he used on everyone else. What was left was something raw, something cold, something that looked a lot like fear. "Let go of me," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" I said, "Let go," he repeated, louder this time. Her hand loosened, confusion flashing across her face. "Daniel, what are you?" The sound cracked through the lobby before she could finish. Sharp, loud, final. His hand connected with her cheek, the force of it snapping her head to the side, sending her stumbling backward. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor, the screen still lit, still recording. For a moment, no one breathed. Emily stared up at him from where she had fallen, one hand pressed against her face, her eyes wide, uncomprehending. "What? What are you doing?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer her. He was still looking at me. And I realized then, in that exact moment, he wasn't trying to fix the situation. He was trying to survive it. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the building and the uneven sound of Emily's breathing on the floor. Daniel took a step toward me, his entire demeanor shifting so fast it would have been impressive if it weren't so pathetic. His shoulders dropped, his face softened, and that familiar, carefully crafted expression returned, the one he used when he needed something. "Victoria," he said, his voice strained but trying for warmth. "I can explain." I didn't move. Behind him, Emily let out a broken laugh, still clutching her cheek. "Explain?" she echoed, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You just hit me." Daniel didn't even look back at her. "I don't know who this is," he continued, gesturing vaguely behind him like she was an inconvenience, not a person. "She's been harassing staff, causing a scene. I was just coming down to deal with it." A ripple of disbelief passed through the crowd. Even people who hadn't seen everything could feel it now. The shift. The lie. I watched him carefully. This was the man I had shared a home with for 10 years. The man who had promised me loyalty, partnership, a future built on trust. And here he was, rewriting reality in real time, trying to erase someone who had just minutes ago been clinging to his arm like she belonged there. Emily pushed herself up, shaking, her eyes wild now. "Are you serious right now?" she shouted. "You don't know me?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he still didn't turn around. "Stop talking," he said under his breath. "No," she snapped, her voice rising, cracking. "No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to pretend this isn't real." The crowd leaned in, phones lifted higher. The air thickened again, tension stretching tight. I folded my arms slowly, the damp fabric of my suit clinging to my skin, grounding me in the moment. "You don't know her," I repeated, my voice calm, almost curious. Daniel's eyes flickered to mine, searching, calculating. "No," he said quickly. "Of course not. She's lying. Probably some obsessed follower or something. You know how people are." I held his gaze. "Then why?" I asked. "Does she have access to your office?" The question landed harder than anything else that had been said. His expression faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. Emily let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Yeah," she said, stepping forward despite the tremor in her legs. "Why don't you tell her that?" Daniel finally turned to face her, his eyes flashing with something close to panic. "I told you to stop talking." "Oh, I'm done stopping," she shot back. "You think you can just erase me because she showed up? Because she's standing here looking at you like that?" She turned to me, her voice shaking but loud, desperate now. "You want the truth? He's been with me for months. He put me in that condo in Hudson Yards, paid for everything. The bags, the car, all of it. You think I could afford that on an intern's salary?" A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. Daniel lunged forward slightly like he was going to grab her, silence her, but Ethan stepped in immediately, one hand pressing firmly against Daniel's chest. "That's enough," Ethan said, his voice low but absolute. "You're not touching her." Daniel froze, glaring at him, but he didn't push past. I didn't look at Emily, I didn't look at Ethan. I kept my eyes on Daniel. $2 million, I said quietly. His face drained. "What?" he whispered. "The transfer," I continued, my voice steady. "Last month, from the offshore account you thought I didn't know about." The silence that followed was different, heavier, final. "You told the board it was a down payment for new MRI equipment," I said. "You told me there were delays with the supplier." Ethan shifted slightly beside me. "There were no delays," he said. "The supplier confirmed this morning they never received a payment. Not a single dollar." Daniel's breathing turned uneven again. "Victoria," he started, his voice cracking now, the confidence completely gone. "You're misunderstanding. I'm not misunderstanding anything," I cut in. I reached out without looking, and a hand placed a folder into mine. Arthur. He had arrived quietly, as he always did, his timing precise. I opened the folder and let the content spill forward, papers scattering across the polished floor between us. Bank statements, property documents, transaction records. "Read it," I said. Daniel didn't move. He stared down at the pages like they were something alive, something that might reach up and drag him under. Emily looked between us, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. "What is that?" she asked. I didn't answer her. "Read it," I repeated. Slowly, like his body no longer fully belonged to him, Daniel dropped to his knees. The sound echoed, sharp, humiliating. He reached for the papers with trembling hands, flipping through them, his face losing what little color it had left. "Victoria, please," he said, his voice breaking completely now. "I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can fix this." I looked down at him, at the man who had stood beside me in boardrooms, in our home, in every part of my life. And for the first time, I felt nothing but clarity. "This isn't a mistake," I said. "It's who you are." Daniel's hands were still shaking as he clutched the papers, his fingers smudging ink across numbers he could no longer deny. The man who used to command rooms full of investors now couldn't even hold a page steady. "Victoria, please," he said again, his voice raw, stripped of everything that once made people believe him. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. I was trying to keep things afloat while you were gone. I needed liquidity. I needed flexibility. I was going to put the money back." I tilted my head slightly. "By buying her a condo?" His mouth opened, then closed. "That wasn't," he started. "Say it carefully," I interrupted, my tone quiet but sharp enough to cut. "Because every word you say right now is being recorded." He froze. Around us, the reality of the situation settled in. Phones were still raised, eyes still fixed. There was no private exit from this, no quiet explanation that could be spun later. The truth was out in the open, and it wasn't going back. Emily let out a shaky breath, her confidence now in fragments at her feet. "You told me it was yours," she said, her voice trembling. "You said it was your bonus, that you were rewarding yourself for all the work you did." Daniel didn't look at her. Of course he didn't. "I was managing a complex financial structure," he muttered, the words sounding hollow even to himself. "You wouldn't understand." Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. "We understand perfectly," he said. "You took funds allocated for life-saving equipment and diverted them for personal use. That's not complexity. That's theft." The word landed hard. Theft. Not a mistake. Not a misunderstanding. Not a technicality. Daniel flinched like he had been struck again. I stepped forward, the soft click of my heels echoing across the marble floor, each step deliberate, measured. I stopped just in front of him, looking down. "For 10 years, I said, I built this place with you. I trusted you. I defended you when the board questioned your decisions. I gave you the authority to lead because I believed you would protect what my father created." He shook his head quickly, tears gathering in his eyes. "I did. I was trying to—" "You were trying to enjoy it," I said. "The title, the power, the lifestyle. While I did the work." He dropped his gaze. The silence stretched. Then I turned. Not away from him, but toward the people watching, the staff, the patients, the families. "This hospital was built on integrity," I said, my voice carrying across the lobby without needing to rise. "Every doctor, every nurse, every employee here is expected to uphold that standard. No exceptions." I paused, letting the weight of that settle. and that includes the CEO. A ripple moved through the crowd, quiet but undeniable. I looked back at Daniel. As of this moment, I said, "You are no longer the CEO of Apex University Hospital." The words landed like a verdict. Final. Irreversible. His head snapped up, panic flooding his face. "You can't do that," he said, scrambling to his feet. "You can't just fire me in the middle of a lobby like this. There are procedures. There's a board. I am the board," I said. That stopped him. Completely. The truth of it hit harder than anything else, not because he didn't know it, but because he had spent so long pretending it wasn't real. "I hold 60% of this company," I continued. "Your position exists because I allowed it, and now I'm taking it back." His legs seemed to give out again, his shoulders slumping as the last of his resistance drained away. "You're ruining everything," he whispered. "Our marriage, our family." I felt something shift inside me at those words. Not pain, not anymore. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't try to use that now." Because whatever we had built together had already been broken long before this moment. Behind him, Emily had gone completely still, her face pale, her eyes darting between us like she was trying to find a version of reality where she wasn't about to lose everything. "What? What about me?" she asked. Her voice small now, nothing like the sharp, confident tone from before. I looked at her, really looked, at the smeared makeup, the trembling hands, the way her posture had collapsed now that the illusion was gone. "You made your choices," I said. Her lip quivered. "He told me." "He told you what you wanted to hear," I replied, "and you chose to believe it." Arthur stepped forward then, his presence calm, precise. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice polite but firm, "your internship is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct. Additionally, you will be contacted regarding your involvement in receiving funds tied to an ongoing investigation." Her knees buckled. She dropped to the floor, the last of her composure shattering. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't, but we already had." I turned away from her, from Daniel, from the wreckage of what had been my life. "Security," I said. 2 guards stepped forward immediately. "Escort Mr. Reynolds off the premises," I continued, "and make sure he doesn't access any restricted areas." Daniel didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just stood there for a second longer, looking at me like he was trying to find something that wasn't there anymore. Then he let them take him, and just like that, it was over. Or at least that's what I thought. By the time the lobby started to return to its normal rhythm, I could feel the exhaustion settling into my bones like a weight I couldn't shake. People drifted back to where they were supposed to be. Nurses moved again, voices low but steady. Families returned to their quiet conversations. The hospital, like it always did, absorbed the chaos and kept going. But something had changed. I could feel it in the air, cleaner, sharper, like a wound that had finally been cut open and could now begin to heal. I leaned back against the reception desk for a moment, closing my eyes just long enough to steady myself. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow fatigue that made everything feel heavier than it should have. Drink this. I opened my eyes. Ethan was standing in front of me, holding out a bottle of water, already opened. He didn't say anything else, didn't ask questions, didn't try to fill the silence with words that wouldn't help. I took it. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once, his gaze lingering on the coffee stain still spreading across my suit. "You should change," he said. "You don't need to stand here any longer." I let out a soft breath. "I do." He didn't argue. That was one of the things I had always respected about him. He knew when to step in and when to step back. "I've got the clinical side covered," he added. "No one's going to let this affect patient care." "I know," I said, and I did. If there was one thing in that building I could still trust without question, it was him. Arthur stepped up beside us, his expression composed but serious. "The legal process is already in motion," he said. "We've notified the appropriate authorities regarding the financial irregularities. Given the evidence, they'll move quickly." I nodded. "Freeze all joint accounts," I said. "Anything tied to Daniel. I don't want a single dollar moved without oversight." "It's already being handled," Arthur replied. Of course it was. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the reality of it settle. 10 years. 10 years of marriage reduced to a series of transactions, lies, and a folder full of evidence scattered across a lobby floor. "I've also prepared the initial paperwork for divorce," Arthur continued, his tone careful but direct. "With the charges involved, the court will likely expedite the process." I looked at him. "Bring it to me later," I said. "I'll sign it." There was no hesitation in my voice, no second thoughts. That surprised me more than anything else. Arthur inclined his head slightly. Understood. He stepped back, already moving on to the next task, because that was what people like him did. They kept things moving forward no matter how messy the situation became. Ethan stayed. He always did. "You don't have to go through all of this alone," he said quietly. I gave a small, tired smile. I know. And for the first time that day, I meant it. For years, I had convinced myself that strength meant handling everything on my own, carrying the weight, making the decisions, protecting everyone else from the fallout. But standing there, in the aftermath of everything that had just happened, I realized something else. Strength wasn't about isolation. It was about knowing who stood with you when everything fell apart. "I should get upstairs," I said after a moment. "There's a board to brief, a narrative to control before someone else tries to write it for us." Ethan's expression shifted slightly at that. "You're thinking ahead already." "I don't have the luxury of not thinking ahead," I replied. Because if there was one thing I understood better than most, it was this. Truth didn't always win on its own. It needed to be protected, presented, defended. And Daniel, for all his flaws, was not a man who would walk away quietly. He would fight, not with facts, with perception, with whatever he had left. I pushed myself off the desk, straightening despite the damp fabric clinging to my skin. "Get the communications team ready," I told Arthur without looking back. "I want a full internal statement drafted within the hour. No speculation, no gaps, just the truth." "Yes, ma'am." I took a step forward, then paused. "Also," I added, "start preparing for a press conference." Arthur hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "That soon?" "Yes," because I could already feel it. That shift, the way a story like this could twist if left unattended. "Control the narrative," I said, "or it controls you." He nodded. As I walked toward the elevators, the polished floor reflecting a version of me I barely recognized, I felt something settle deep inside my chest. Not peace, not yet, but something close. Clarity. The worst had happened. The illusion was gone. And whatever came next, I would face it without pretending anymore. Because if there was one thing I knew for certain now, it was this. The real battle hadn't even started. I had barely made it home when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Not one call, not two, a flood. Notifications stacked on top of each other so fast the screen barely had time to refresh. News alerts, social media tags, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly finding my number again. I hadn't even taken off my shoes. I set my bag down on the entry table, the quiet of the house pressing in around me, and glanced at the screen. The first headline hit like a slap. Hospital heiress assaults young intern in public meltdown. I stared at it. Then another. CEO humiliated by jealous wife in shocking hospital scandal. My chest tightened. I opened one of the videos. It loaded instantly. Of course it did. It was everywhere. The footage was from Emily's live stream, but it wasn't the full story. It had been cut, edited, rearranged. The parts where she shouted at Henry were gone. The moment she deliberately spilled the coffee was gone. All that remained was me standing there, my voice calm but firm, my posture unyielding, followed by Daniel on his knees, then Ethan stepping in front of him. The framing was perfect, deliberate, calculated. I looked cold, controlling, guilty. The comments below were already spiraling. She looks like a nightmare. Poor guy, imagine living with someone like that, definitely cheating with the doctor. You can see it. I dropped the phone onto the table. For a second, I just stood there, staring at nothing, letting the noise of it settle in my head. So this was his move. Of course it was. Daniel had never been good at dealing with truth, but he was very good at managing perception, at shifting blame, at making himself look like the victim in a situation he had created. He couldn't win in a courtroom, but he could try to win out here. I picked the phone back up, scrolling quickly now, scanning. The same clips. The same narrative. Different accounts, but the tone was identical. Too identical. Coordinated. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Immediate. I didn't hesitate. When I opened the door, Arthur was already there, a folder tucked under his arm, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. They moved faster than expected, he said as he stepped inside. I noticed, I replied. He set the folder down on the table beside my phone, glancing at the screen still lit up with notifications. We traced the initial uploads. They didn't come from random users. This was seeded. I folded my arms. A PR firm. He nodded. A black PR firm. They specialize in this kind of thing. Bot amplification, narrative control, targeted smear campaigns. How much? I asked. He didn't need to clarify the question. Given the scale, he said, at least several $100,000 to start, maybe more if they plan to sustain it. I let out a quiet breath. So that was where the rest of the money had gone. Not just stolen, weaponized. He's trying to force a negotiation, Arthur continued. Public pressure, reputational damage. If he can make you look unstable, vindictive, he can leverage that in the divorce. I shook my head slowly. He's not trying to negotiate, I said. He's trying to punish me. Arthur didn't disagree. He knows he's finished, I added. This is about dragging me down with him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The house felt too still, too quiet compared to the chaos unfolding outside its walls. What are our options? I asked. We can issue a statement, Arthur said. Deny the claims, request removal of the content, threaten legal action against the accounts distributing it. And how will that look? I asked. He hesitated. Defensive, he admitted. Possibly evasive. Exactly. I walked over to the window, looking out at the street, at the normalcy of it. Cars passing, people walking, lives continuing like nothing had changed, but everything had. The more we try to suppress it, I said, the more it looks like we have something to hide. Arthur stepped closer. Then what do you suggest? I turned back to him. We don't hide, I said. The words felt solid the moment I said them. Certain. We go public. He studied me for a second. A press conference. Yes. Tomorrow? Yes, that was the only way. Not a statement. Not a controlled release buried in legal language. Face it. Directly. All major networks, I continued. Local, national, online outlets. Anyone who's already picked up the story. Arthur nodded slowly, already shifting into action. We'll need to prepare carefully. Questions will be aggressive. They'll push the narrative. Let them, I said, because I wasn't afraid of the truth. Not anymore. I picked up my phone again, looking at the screen filled with lies, with half-truths twisted into something ugly. Truth doesn't need to be edited, I said quietly. It just needs to be seen. Arthur gave a small nod. "I'll make the arrangements," he said. As he turned to leave, I added one more thing. "And Arthur?" He paused. "Make sure every piece of evidence is ready," I said. "Not just the financials." He understood immediately. His expression sharpened slightly. "Everything?" "Everything." Because if Daniel wanted a public fight, he was going to get one. And this time, there would be no version of the story he could hide behind. Only the truth. And I was done protecting him from it. The auditorium was already full by the time I stepped onto the stage the next morning. Cameras lined the back wall, their lenses pointed forward like a row of unblinking eyes. Reporters filled every seat, some leaning forward, others whispering to each other, all waiting for something they could turn into a headline. I wore black, simple, clean. No jewelry except my wedding band, which I hadn't taken off yet, though I knew I would soon. Ethan walked beside me, steady as always, his presence quiet but grounding. When we reached the table, I took my seat, placed my hands in front of me, and looked out at the room. The noise faded, just like that. "My name is Victoria Reynolds," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the space, "and I am here to address the events that took place yesterday at Apex University Hospital. No notes, no script, just the truth. The footage circulating online is incomplete and deliberately edited," I continued. "It omits critical context, including the actions that led to the incident and the evidence that followed." A hand shot up almost immediately. A reporter stood before I could even acknowledge him. "Mrs. Reynolds, are you denying that you publicly humiliated your husband and abused your authority to remove him from his position?" The room leaned in, waiting. I held his gaze. "No," I said. "I am confirming that I removed him from his position because he committed serious ethical and legal violations, including the misappropriation of funds intended for patient care." A ripple moved through the audience. Another hand went up. A woman this time, sharp-eyed, voice steady. "There are also allegations that you have an inappropriate relationship with Dr. Parker and that this was a coordinated effort to remove your husband." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned slightly. Ethan stood. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. He simply reached for the microphone and faced the room. "I will address that," he said. His voice was calm, even, but there was something deeper beneath it. "Victoria Reynolds and I have known each other for over 15 years, he continued. "We are colleagues, we are friends, and we have always conducted ourselves with professionalism and integrity." He paused. "I have had feelings for her," he added, the words landing with quiet weight. "For a long time. But I have never acted on those feelings while she was married. Not once." The room went still, not because of scandal, because of honesty. "I am standing here today," he said, "because I refuse to watch a good woman be destroyed by a narrative built on lies." He stepped back. No drama, no apology, just truth. I picked up where he left off. "Now," I said, "let's talk about facts." Arthur moved to the side, signaling, and the screen behind us lit up. Bank records, transaction logs, property documents, clear, undeniable. "This is a transfer of $2 million, I said. "Funds that were allocated for critical medical equipment. The equipment was never purchased. The supplier never received payment." Another slide. "This is the property purchased with that money." Another. "And this," I said, my voice steady, "is additional evidence we chose not to disclose yesterday." The room shifted again. Curiosity. Tension. The next image appeared. A document. A DNA report. "This confirms that Daniel Reynolds fathered a child 4 years ago," I said. "A child he has never acknowledged or supported." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, whispers, cameras clicking faster. I let it settle. "Yesterday was not about humiliation," I continued. "It was about accountability for his actions as a CEO and as a person. Silence followed, not empty, full, the kind that means people are listening, really listening. The press conference ended without chaos, without shouting, without anything that could be twisted into something it wasn't. Just truth. Clean, clear, final. In the days that followed, everything changed. The narrative shifted, slow at first, then all at once. The same outlets that had questioned me now reported the facts. The same voices that had doubted now condemned what he had done. Daniel lost everything, his position, his reputation, his freedom. Emily disappeared just as quickly as she had appeared. And me? I rebuilt. Not just the hospital, myself. Ethan stayed, not as a replacement, not as a rescue, but as someone who had always been there, waiting without pressure, without expectation. Time did the rest, and somewhere along the way, I realized something I wish I had understood much earlier. The real victory isn't watching someone else fall. It's standing tall after they tried to take everything from you. It's choosing peace over bitterness, truth over silence, strength over fear, and walking forward without ever needing to look back. If this story stayed with you, if you believe in quiet strength and real accountability, take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave the words, "Stay strong," always in the comments below.